The Gallery of Forgotten Dreams. The Dreamer's Beginning. Welcome to Twisted Heartstrings, where love and revenge intertwine in the most unexpected ways. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join us on this emotional journey. Maya Sharma stood before her latest painting, her fingers still stained with crimson and gold. The small gallery in Mumbai's Bandra district wasn't much, just a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and flickering tube lights, but it was hers. Every canvas hanging on those walls represented sleepless nights, skipped meals, and dreams that refused to die despite the world's indifference. She was 26 years old, with eyes that held both fire and exhaustion. Her long black hair was always tied in a messy bun, and her clothes perpetually carried specks of paint like colorful memories. Maya had spent 5 years trying to make a name for herself in Mumbai's competitive art scene, taking odd jobs to pay rent, painting in the hours between midnight and dawn. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was her first solo exhibition. The unexpected visitor. The gallery was nearly empty. A few art students wandered around. Some local journalists took obligatory photos, and Maya's heart sank with each passing minute. She had poured her life savings into this exhibition, believing that talent and passion would be enough. Reality, as always, proved crueler than dreams. "This one is extraordinary." The voice came from behind her, deep and smooth like aged whiskey. Maya turned to find a man standing before her largest painting, a portrait she had titled Unspoken Words. He was tall, perhaps in his early 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that screamed money and privilege. His sharp jawline, intense brown eyes, and the way he carried himself suggested someone used to getting what he wanted. "Thank you," Maya replied, trying to hide her surprise that anyone was actually looking at her work seriously. "No, I mean it," he continued, stepping closer to the canvas. "The way you've captured the emotion in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, it's like you've painted loneliness itself. This is raw talent." Maya felt her cheeks warm. Compliments were rare in her world. "You seem to understand art." He smiled, extending his hand. "Arjun Malhotra. And yes, I collect art. It's one of the few things that makes life bearable." There was a shadow in his eyes when he said this, something that made Maya curious despite herself. "Maya Sharma," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and she noticed his hands were surprisingly smooth, untouched by any real struggle. The connection begins. Over the next hour, Arjun didn't just look at her paintings, he studied them. He asked questions that showed genuine understanding, talked about technique and emotion with equal passion, and before Maya knew it, she was telling him about her journey, her struggles, her dreams. He listened with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. "I want to buy 5 of your paintings," Arjun announced suddenly. Maya's heart stopped. 5? But that would be 3 lakhs, he said simply, pulling out his phone. "I'll transfer the advance right now. The rest when you deliver them to my office." 3 lakhs. That was more money than Maya had earned in the past year. It was rent for 6 months, new canvases, proper paints, maybe even a decent studio. It was breathing room in a life that had been suffocating her. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll have dinner with me tomorrow," Arjun replied with a smile that could melt ice. "I want to know more about the artist behind these extraordinary works." Maya should have been cautious. She should have asked questions, maintained professional distance, protected the walls she had built around her heart. But when someone drowning sees a lifeline, they don't question its source. They just hold on. "Okay," she whispered. The romance blooms. What began as one dinner became many. Arjun entered Maya's life like a storm, beautiful and overwhelming. He took her to restaurants where the menu had no prices, art galleries where her paintings would never hang, and showed her a world she had only glimpsed through gallery windows. But what surprised Maya most was that Arjun seemed genuinely interested in her world too. He visited her tiny studio apartment in Andheri, sat on her paint-stained floor, and talked about art until sunrise. He understood her passion in a way no one else ever had. "You see the world differently," he told her one night, as they sat on Marine Drive watching the waves. "Most people look at life and see what's there. You look at life and see what could be. That's magic, Maya." She fell in love with him in increments. The way he listened when she talked about color theory, how he surprised her with expensive art supplies, but never made her feel small for her modest lifestyle. The gentle way he tucked her hair behind her ear when she painted. The intensity in his eyes when he looked at her, like she was the most precious artwork he had ever encountered. 2 months passed like a dream. Maya's art improved, inspired by the joy that suddenly colored her life. She painted Arjun obsessively, trying to capture the complexity she saw in him, the shadows that sometimes crossed his face when he thought she wasn't looking. The proposal. On a warm evening in October, Arjun took Maya to the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel's rooftop. The gateway of India glittered below them, and the Arabian Sea stretched endlessly into darkness. He got down on one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the city lights like a captured star. Maya Sharma, you've shown me that life can be beautiful again. You've reminded me what it means to feel, to dream, to hope. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life being inspired by you. Maya's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't supposed to happen to girls like her. Girls from small towns who came to big cities with nothing but talent and dreams. Girls who had been rejected and ignored and told they weren't enough. But here was this incredible man, offering her everything she had never dared to want. Yes, she sobbed, laughing and crying at once. Yes, 1,000 times yes. As Arjun slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya felt like her life was finally beginning. She had found love and success, and the future stretched before her like a blank canvas waiting to be painted with happiness. She had no idea that some canvases are meant to be painted with tears. The first shadow. A week later, Maya decided to surprise Arjun at his office. She had completed a portrait of him, her best work yet, and wanted to see his face when he received it. She took a cab to his company's tower in Lower Parel, a gleaming building of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. The receptionist looked confused when Maya mentioned Arjun's name. Mr. Malhotra is in a meeting with his fiancée and her family. Is he expecting you? The world tilted. His what? His fiancée, Miss Natasha Kapoor. They're planning the engagement party for next month. It's all very exciting. The receptionist smiled, oblivious to the devastation her words had caused. Maya felt like she was drowning in air. The ring on her finger suddenly felt like a shackle. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped the portrait she had brought, looking at Arjun's painted face through new eyes. How had she been so blind? She didn't go up to his office. Instead, she walked out of the building in a daze, the portrait clutched to her chest. People bumped into her on the street. Horns blared. The city continued its chaos, but Maya heard nothing. She just walked and walked until she found herself back at her studio. The discovery. That night, Maya became a detective of her own heartbreak. She searched Arjun's name online and found what she had been too love-drunk to look for before. Articles about his engagement to Natasha Kapoor, daughter of one of India's largest pharmaceutical companies. Engagement photos from last year. A wedding announcement scheduled for 2 months from now. Their entire relationship had been a lie. While he had been professing love to her, he had been planning a wedding with someone else. Every kiss had been a betrayal. Every promise had been a poison. Maya looked at the paintings she had created of him, all those canvases where she had tried to capture his essence, and she saw the truth she had missed. The shadows in his eyes weren't depth, they were deceit. The complexity she had admired was simply the guilt of a man living a double life. She had been nothing but a distraction, a secret, a mistake he could walk away from. The burning. In movies, heartbroken women cry and eat ice cream. Maya did neither. Instead, she took every painting of Arjun, carried them to the small terrace of her building, and set them on fire. She watched the canvas curl and blacken, watched his face disappear into smoke and ash. The ring he had given her, she threw into the flames too. Her neighbor, old Mrs. D'Souza, came up to check on her. "Beta, what are you doing?" "Burning the past," Maya replied, her voice eerily calm. "And planning the future." Mrs. D'Souza saw something in Maya's eyes that made her shiver, something cold and determined that hadn't been there before. "Don't let anger destroy you, child." Maya smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm not going to let it destroy me, Ani. I'm going to let it rebuild me. Stronger. Better. And when I'm done, he'll wish he had never learned my name." As the last painting burned to ash, Maya made a decision. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't fade away like he probably expected. Instead, she would transform. She would become someone so extraordinary that Arjun Malhotra would spend the rest of his life regretting that he had treated her like she was forgettable. Because Maya Sharma was many things, but forgettable was not one of them. The next morning, Maya sold everything she owned, withdrew all her savings, and bought a one-way ticket to Paris. She left behind no forwarding address, no explanations, no goodbyes. She simply vanished, like a painting that had been removed from a wall, leaving only the faintest outline of where it once hung. Arjun called her phone 347 times. Maya counted. Then she threw the phone into the Seine River and watched it sink, just like the girl she used to be. The old Maya died in Mumbai, drowned in betrayal and broken promises. The woman who emerged in Paris was something altogether different. Something sharper. Something dangerous. Something unforgettable. Oh, discover Maya's transformation and the beginning of her perfectly orchestrated revenge. The canvas of revenge. The phoenix rises. 3 years had passed since Maya Sharma disappeared from Mumbai. 3 years of transformation that would have broken a weaker person but had forged her into something extraordinary. Paris had been her chrysalis, and from it emerged not the struggling artist who once begged for gallery space, but Myra Kapoor, a name that now whispered through the international art world like a seductive secret. The small apartment in Montmartre had been her first home in Paris. She had arrived with barely enough money to survive 2 months, speaking broken French, knowing no one. But Maya had always possessed something that money couldn't buy: raw, undeniable talent. And now she had something else too, a burning purpose that kept her working when exhaustion tried to claim her. She had started by painting on the streets, her canvases propped against the walls of Sacré-Cœur. Tourists would stop, captivated by the intensity of her work. Unlike other street artists who painted cheerful scenes of Paris, Maya's work was different. She painted emotions: betrayal, rage, transformation, revenge. Her paintings made people uncomfortable, made them feel, made them remember. The transformation complete. Within 6 months, a gallery owner named Pierre Dubois had discovered her. He was an old man with a sharp eye for talent and a sharper understanding of the art market. "You paint like someone who has been destroyed and rebuilt," he had told her in French, which she was beginning to understand. "That is the kind of art that sells for millions." Pierre became her mentor, teaching her not just about art, but about the business of being an artist. He introduced her to collectors, critics, and the elite circles where art was currency and reputation was everything. Maya absorbed it all like a sponge, learning to navigate the world that had once rejected her. She changed everything about herself. Her wardrobe transformed from paint-stained kurtas to designer dresses. She learned to speak French fluently, picked up Italian and Spanish. She attended opening nights at the Louvre, had coffee with contemporary art legends, and slowly, methodically, built a reputation that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. But she never forgot why she was doing this. Every success was a brushstroke in a larger painting, the masterpiece of her revenge. She changed her name legally to Myra Kapoor, keeping just enough connection to her past to ensure that when the time came, Arjun would know exactly who she was. She crafted a backstory: a wealthy NRI family, educated in London, trained in Florence. The art world believed it because people always believe success has pedigree. The return. In October 2024, Myra Kapoor returned to India not as the forgotten Maya Sharma, but as one of the most talked-about contemporary artists in the world. The Times of India ran a full-page feature: "Indian artist takes international scene by storm." Her face, now sophisticated and elegant, stared from magazine covers and social media feeds. The Mumbai Museum of Modern Art had offered her an entire wing for a 3-month exhibition, the kind of space she had once fantasized about. The kind of space where Arjun Malhotra's new wife had once had her mediocre photography displayed, bought not by talent, but by her family's influence. Myra accepted, but on one condition: complete creative control. She would curate everything: the paintings, the lighting, the guest list for the opening night. The museum agreed immediately. Artists of Myra Kapoor's caliber didn't need to compromise. She rented a penthouse in Worli, overlooking the same Arabian Sea where Arjun had once proposed to her with lies on his lips. But this apartment was nothing like her old studio. It was luxury incarnate: floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble, a private terrace where she set up her studio. Money, she had learned, was power, and power was freedom. The exhibition of deception. Myra spent 2 months preparing her exhibition, which she titled Faces of Deception. Every painting was a psychological portrait, each one depicting a different face of betrayal. They were technically brilliant and emotionally devastating, abstract enough to be interpreted universally, specific enough that anyone who knew the truth would recognize the story. The centerpiece was a massive canvas, 12 feet tall, titled The Hollow Man. It showed a figure in an expensive suit, but where his face should be was just an empty void, surrounded by broken mirrors reflecting different lies. Anyone who had known Arjun 3 years ago would see him in that painting. But Myra's revenge was more sophisticated than simple exposure. She had learned that destroying someone's reputation directly was crude. The elegant way was to make them destroy themselves. She began by researching Arjun's life with the thoroughness of a detective. What she discovered was both satisfying and surprising. His marriage to Natasha Kapoor had lasted exactly 18 months before imploding spectacularly. Natasha had discovered his multiple affairs. Apparently, Maya hadn't been his only secret, and had divorced him publicly and viciously, taking half his wealth and most of his social standing. Arjun's business had suffered too. Without the Kapoor family backing, several of his investments had failed. He was still wealthy by normal standards, but in his circle, he was now seen as diminished, desperate, trying too hard to reclaim his former glory. Perfect, Myra thought. A man at his lowest is most vulnerable to hope. The invitation. The invitation list for her exhibition opening was carefully curated. Every major art collector in Mumbai, every critic, every society figure who mattered. And prominently on that list, Arjun Malhotra. She didn't send the invitation directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, she ensured that his mother received one. Mrs. Malhotra was on the museum's board and a known art collector. Myra had done her homework. She knew Arjun still tried to impress his mother, still sought her approval like a boy hungry for love. The day before the opening, Myra gave an interview to a prominent Mumbai magazine. She sat in her penthouse, wearing an ivory silk dress that cost more than her entire wardrobe used to, and spoke about her journey with practiced elegance. "Success tastes sweetest," she said with a mysterious smile, "when it's seasoned with the memory of those who underestimated you. I paint for everyone who was told they weren't enough, that they didn't belong, that they should accept less than they deserved. My art is my answer to every person who tried to make me small." The interview went viral. Her Instagram followers doubled overnight. And Myra knew Arjun would see it, would read between those lines, would wonder if she was talking about him. The opening night. The night of the exhibition opening, Myra stood in her studio, applying the final touches to her makeup. She wore a black gown by an Italian designer, simple but stunning, with her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. Diamond earrings caught the light, real ones, bought with money she had earned herself. The transformation was complete. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Mrs. Malhotra confirmed. "She's bringing her son." Myra smiled at her reflection. "Game on," she whispered. The museum was transformed into something magical. White lights cast her paintings in dramatic shadows. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes. Mumbai's elite filled the space, their expensive perfumes mixing with the scent of fresh flowers and wealth. Myra arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that had clearly been choreographed. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. She moved through the crowd like royalty, greeting collectors and critics with the perfect balance of warmth and exclusivity. And then she saw him. Arjun stood near the entrance with his mother, and for a moment, Myra allowed herself to simply observe him. He had aged. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a certain weariness in his posture. He wore his expensive suit like armor, but she could see the cracks. Life had not been kind to him. Good. The recognition. Arjun was studying one of her paintings when their eyes met across the room. Myra watched recognition dawn on his face. First confusion, then shock, then something that looked almost like pain. He took a step toward her, but she turned away smoothly, greeting a French collector as if she hadn't seen him at all. Let him wait. Let him wonder. Let him feel what it's like to be invisible. Throughout the evening, Myra felt his eyes on her constantly. She laughed at others' jokes, discussed technique with admirers, and avoided Arjun with surgical precision. Every time he tried to approach her, she was suddenly engaged in urgent conversation with someone else. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, Arjun managed to corner her near the centerpiece painting. Up close, she could see he looked even more worn than she had initially thought. But when he spoke, his voice still had that same smooth quality she remembered. Maya, she turned slowly, as if noticing him for the first time. I'm sorry, do I know you? Her voice was cool, polished, nothing like the eager girl he had once known. It's me, Arjun. Arjun Malhotra. Oh. She let recognition dawn slowly on her face, adding just a hint of surprise. Goodness, it's been years. How are you? She kept her tone pleasant but distant, as if he were merely an old acquaintance she'd forgotten about. He looked stricken. Maya, I tried to reach you. You disappeared. I called. I went to your studio. Did you? She tilted her head slightly. How odd. I don't recall giving you my new number. And it's Myra now, by the way. Myra Kapoor. I found that Maya Sharma was holding me back, so I left her behind in Mumbai along with everything else that wasn't serving me. The barb hit its mark. She saw him flinch. The game begins. Your work, Arjun said, gesturing to the paintings around them. It's extraordinary. Even better than before. You've achieved everything you dreamed of. Not everything, Myra replied, her eyes meeting his steadily. Some dreams died, but I built better ones on their graves. I owe you an explanation. Do you? She interrupted, her voice still pleasant, but with an edge sharp enough to cut. How interesting. I don't recall asking for one. But then again, I've learned that explanations are what people offer when they want to feel better about the damage they've caused. Tell me, does it work? Does explaining betrayal somehow erase it? Arjun looked like she had struck him. Myra, I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. My marriage to Natasha was arranged by our families. I tried to break it off, but there were contracts, business deals, pressures you couldn't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Myra said softly. You chose convenience over courage, money over honesty. You wanted to have everything. The respectable marriage your family demanded and the passionate affair with the struggling artist who made you feel alive. You just didn't expect the artist to have a spine. That's not fair. Fair. For the first time, emotion cracked through her polished exterior. You proposed to me while engaged to another woman. You let me believe I had found love when I was just your temporary distraction. And now you want to talk about fair? The twist. Arjun's face crumbled. I loved you. I still love you. The marriage was hell. Natasha and I barely spoke. We divorced because she was having an affair with her yoga instructor, but the truth is, neither of us wanted to be married. I thought I could make it work, but every day I was with her, I was thinking about you. How romantic, Myra said dryly. And yet, not romantic enough to actually choose me when it mattered. I was a coward, Arjun admitted. I was afraid of my family, afraid of losing the business, afraid of disappointing people. But losing you was worse than all of that combined. You have to believe me. Myra studied him for a long moment. This was the moment she had dreamed about for 3 years, having him beg, having him regret, having him realize what he had lost. But something was different. The satisfaction she had expected to feel was hollow. Looking at him now, desperate and diminished, she didn't feel victorious. She felt tired. Your mother is looking for you, she said finally, nodding toward where Mrs. Malhotra stood waiting. You should go. The past is the past, Arjun. Let's leave it there. But as she turned to walk away, Arjun caught her hand. Wait, please. Give me a chance to prove I've changed. Have dinner with me. Just once. Let me explain everything properly. Myra looked at his hand on hers, then up at his face. She saw genuine desperation there, real pain. And suddenly, a new plan formed in her mind, one far more elegant than simple rejection. I'll think about it, she said softly, pulling her hand away gently. You can call my assistant for my schedule. She walked away, feeling his eyes on her back, and allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Arjun Malhotra had seen her success, felt his loss, and tasted his regret. Now came Phase 2, making him fall in love with her all over again. And this time, she would be the one holding all the cards. The strategy unfolds. Over the next few weeks, Myra carefully orchestrated a series of coincidental encounters. She accepted his dinner invitation but arrived late, treated him cordially but distantly, talked about her exciting life in Paris. She mentioned other men casually, a French artist who had pursued her, an Italian collector who sent her flowers every week. Arjun, she noted with satisfaction, looked increasingly desperate with each meeting. He sent her paintings he had bought from her show, accompanied by handwritten notes apologizing for the past. He showed up at her gallery events, always respectful, always hopeful, always just slightly pathetic. The art world watched with fascination as billionaire Arjun Malhotra publicly pursued the now famous Myra Kapoor. Society columnists wrote about their reunion romance. People who had known them both 3 years ago whispered about the delicious irony of the man who had once treated her like a secret, now desperate for her attention. Myra controlled every aspect of their renewed relationship. She decided when they met, where they went, what they discussed. She kept him at a distance emotionally, while occasionally allowing glimpses of the connection they had once shared, just enough to keep him hoping, never enough to satisfy. And slowly, carefully, she made him fall in love with her all over again. But there was one thing Myra hadn't planned for, her own heart. Because as she spent more time with Arjun, as she listened to his genuine remorse and saw his efforts to become a better man, old feelings began to stir. Feelings she had thought she had burned away along with those paintings 3 years ago. Late at night, alone in her penthouse, Myra would sometimes catch herself remembering the good moments. The way Arjun had understood her art, the conversations that had lasted until dawn, the feeling of being truly seen by another person. "Don't be stupid," she would tell her reflection. "He hurt you. He lied to you. This is revenge, not romance." But her heart, that traitorous organ, wasn't listening. The unexpected variable. 2 months into their careful dance, something happened that changed everything. Myra received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, a weak, elderly voice spoke. "Myra? This is Anjali Malhotra, Arjun's mother." Myra's first instinct was to hang up, but curiosity stayed her hand. "Mrs. Malhotra, how can I help you? I need to see you. Alone. Please. It's about Arjun, about what really happened 3 years ago. There are things you don't know, things he won't tell you because he's protecting me. I'm not interested in. I'm dying." Mrs. Malhotra interrupted bluntly. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I have weeks, maybe a month. And I need to tell you the truth before I go, because my son is destroying himself over guilt, and you deserve to know why." Myra's hand tightened on the phone. "What truth?" "Not over the phone. Come to my house tomorrow morning. Arjun will be at work. Please. For both your sakes." The line went dead. Myra stood in her penthouse, watching the sun set over Mumbai, and felt the first crack in the armor she had so carefully constructed. A dying woman asking for truth. What game was this? But even as she questioned it, she knew she would go. Because despite everything, despite all her planning and her revenge and her careful control, Maya Sharma, the girl she had tried to bury, still existed somewhere inside Myra Kapoor. And that girl had always been unable to resist a mystery. Tomorrow, she decided, she would hear what Anjali Malhotra had to say. And then she would decide whether her revenge needed revision. Outside her window, Mumbai glittered like a city of lies and secrets. Somewhere in that sprawl, Arjun Malhotra was probably thinking about her, hoping she might forgive him, dreaming of redemption he didn't deserve. Or did he? That was the question that kept Myra awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if revenge could ever truly satisfy the hunger it promised to feed. Would you like me to continue with the masterpiece of truth now? 311:09 Part 3, The Masterpiece of Truth. The Dying Woman's Confession. The Malhotra mansion in Malabar Hill stood like a monument to old money and older secrets. Myra had never been here before. 3 years ago, Arjun had always come to her world, never invited her into his. Now, as her driver pulled up to the imposing gates, she understood why. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress designed to keep certain people out and certain truths in. A servant led her through marble corridors adorned with expensive art, some pieces she recognized from international auctions. Every painting, every sculpture screamed wealth. But there was something cold about the space, something that suggested beauty without warmth, luxury without love. Anjali Malhotra waited in a sunlit conservatory filled with plants that someone else clearly maintained. She sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a cashmere shawl despite the Mumbai heat. Up close, the cancer's ravages were obvious. Her skin had a gray pallor, her body seemed diminished, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent, assessing Myra with the same intensity her son once had. "You came," Mrs. Malhotra said, her voice stronger than Myra expected. "I wasn't sure you would." "Curiosity is both my weakness and my strength," Myra replied, sitting in the chair across from her. She kept her posture elegant, her expression neutral. 3 years in Paris had taught her never to show vulnerability to those who might exploit it. "You've changed," the older woman observed. "The girl who loved my son was softer, more open. This version of you has armor. Your son taught me the value of armor." Mrs. Malhotra nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But before you condemn him completely, you need to know something. The engagement to Natasha Kapoor wasn't his choice. It was mine." Myra had expected excuses, justifications, the usual maternal defense of a guilty son. What she hadn't expected was this blunt admission. "I'm listening." The hidden truth. Mrs. Malhotra shifted in her wheelchair, and Myra noticed the tremor in her hands, the way pain flickered across her features before being suppressed. 20 years ago, my husband, Arjun's father, made some catastrophically bad business decisions. He was brilliant but reckless, always chasing the next big opportunity. He invested everything we had, everything we'd built over generations, into a venture that failed spectacularly. She paused, taking a sip of water from a glass on the side table. "We were bankrupt. Worse than bankrupt, we owed debts to dangerous people. The kind who don't accept payment plans or excuses. My husband had a heart attack from the stress. He died knowing he'd destroyed everything our family had built." Myra remained silent, her mind racing. This wasn't the story she had imagined. "I was left with a teenage son, crushing debts, and creditors who were making threats that went beyond financial ruin. The Kapoor family offered a solution. They would absorb all our debts, provide capital to restart the business, and restore our social standing. In exchange, when Arjun turned 30, he would marry Natasha." "A business arrangement," Myra said softly. "A prison sentence," Mrs. Malhotra corrected. "But one I accepted because I was terrified and desperate and convinced it was the only way to save my son's future. I made that deal when Arjun was 16. He didn't know about it until he was 28. The conservatory felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Myra's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to crack. "Go on." "When I told him about the arrangement 2 years before the wedding, he was furious. He said he'd rather be poor than trapped. But I was already sick by then. The cancer had just been diagnosed. And I begged him." Mrs. Malhotra's voice broke. "I begged my son to honor the agreement because if he didn't, the Kapoors would call in their loans, destroy what remained of the business, and I would die knowing I'd left him with nothing." The weight of choices. Myra felt something cold settling in her chest. "And then he met me. Yes, and for the first time since learning about the engagement, I saw him happy. Truly happy. He would come home from seeing you, and his entire face would light up. He told me about your talent, your passion, your dreams. I watched him fall in love with you, and I knew that I had destroyed my son's chance at happiness. Then why didn't you release him from the arrangement?" Myra's voice was sharper than she intended. "Because I'm a coward," Mrs. Malhotra replied simply. "Because I was dying and terrified of leaving him alone and broke. Because the Kapoors made it clear that breaking the engagement would mean total financial destruction, and I convinced myself that he could learn to be happy with security even without love. Because I was selfish and scared, and I sacrificed my son's happiness for my own peace of mind." She reached into her shawl and pulled out a folder, her hands shaking. "These are bank statements, legal documents, the original contract with the Kapoors. Everything that proves what I'm telling you is true. I never showed these to Arjun. He only knows the basic facts, not the details of how bad it really was." Myra took the folder but didn't open it. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm dying, and I've had months to think about the legacy I'm leaving. I realize that I'm about to leave this world having taught my son that love is a luxury he can't afford, that duty matters more than happiness, that being a good son means being a miserable man. That's not the legacy I want." The unraveling. Mrs. Malhotra leaned forward, her eyes intense despite her weakened body. Arjun never told you about the engagement because I made him promise not to. I said if you knew about Natasha, you might confront her or cause a scandal that would trigger the contract penalties. I convinced him that keeping you ignorant was protecting you. I manipulated my son's love for you into becoming the weapon that destroyed that love. Myra's hands tightened on the folder. The armor she had built so carefully was cracking, and underneath it, she felt raw and exposed. He still lied to me. He still proposed while engaged to someone else. You're right. He did. And that was his choice, his weakness, his sin. But he made that choice from a place of desperation, not cruelty. He proposed to you because he knew the engagement party was being scheduled, and he couldn't bear the thought of marrying Natasha while you believed you had a future together. In his twisted logic, if you were engaged to him, you would wait, and somehow he would find a way to escape the arrangement. That's insane. Love often is, Mrs. Malhotra replied. Especially love trapped between impossible choices. Myra stood abruptly, walking to the conservatory windows. The Mumbai sprawl stretched below, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, each person carrying their own impossible choices. The marriage didn't last, she said finally. Why didn't he find me afterward? He tried. For over a year, he hired private investigators, called every contact he had in the art world, even flew to Paris 3 times looking for you. But you had vanished completely, changed your name, your appearance, built new identity. You didn't want to be found. No, Myra whispered. I didn't.